Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco, California.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another great episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode, we're back with more in our Linux command line series, and it's been such a great time so far that joining us back in the studio again, he liked it so much, Mr. Don Pizzette is here with us again today. Don, how's it going today?
Boy, you just can't keep me away from that Linux command line. So we are back at it today. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at package management, which is a fancy way of saying installing software. And so we're going to take a look at the Debian operating system, or the Debian variants that are out there, and get a chance to see how we can install software on them, how we can work with it, how we can remove software, and the various ways that we get software packages up and running from the command line.
All right, Don, well, let's go ahead and, without further ado, let's jump into Debian package management. Obviously, when we say Debian package management, that means that this is some sort of ilk for Debian type systems. Correct?
Yes, yeah, and you know, it used to be back in the day when half the viewers out there would say, "That's awesome! I run Debian, I love it." Right? But today, actually, not many people run straight up Debian, but they do run some of the variants that come from it. Right? Ubuntu, one of the most popular Linux distros out there, is a fork of Debian. So they take Debian dev, the dev fork of it, and then they turn that into Ubuntu. If you run Linux Mint is a fork of Ubuntu, which in turn is a fork of Debian. So they all kind of have Debian deep down under their deep dark souls. And that means, fortunately, the way we manage packages on them is the same. So if you're running Debian, Linux Mint, Ubuntu, Kali Linux, a number of the other variants that are out there, they all use the same package manager, and the stuff we're going to see right here in this episode. So while it's titled Debian Package Management, it really applies to a lot more distros than that. Now, if you're running Red Hat or Fedora or CentOS, they're all Red Hat based. They have a different package manager. So when you go out on the internet and you go to look for software, you might find where software is packaged for Debian-based systems, or it's packaged for Red Hat-based systems, or better, maybe it's packaged for both. But that's not always the case. Now, I think you'll find that most software is packaged for Debian because of Ubuntu, because of its popularity. So you're more likely to find that than you are the Red Hat side. So if you're in this camp, the camp for this episode, you're in luck, because most people are going to build for you. And that package, let's talk about why that's important, right? Because the package itself does something important. We don't technically need packages to install software. We just need the source code, right? A developer can release the source code, we could download it, and we could compile it and run it. And we'll see how to do that in another episode. But we could do that on Red Hat or Debian. We wouldn't care what distro we were on. We could compile the source code. The problem is, first off, it's a pain in the butt. Right? So, so there's that. It's not a lot of fun. The second thing is, software has a lot of pieces. Right? There's manual pages that go in one directory. There's binaries that go in another directory. There's libraries that go in a third directory, and config files that go who knows where. Maybe your home directory, maybe /etc. Things go in /var. It's a mess, right? And if you know the software intimately, then you know where to copy those files, and that's great. But most of us don't. Most of us don't know all the little bits and pieces that go along with a piece of software. So when you download a package, the package is actually two things in one. One, it's an archive. It's a collection of all the files you need in one file. So we just download one file instead of 1,000, and that's convenient. And then two, it's got metadata inside of it that describes what the name of the software is, what version the software is, where all those files should go, and other security policy information that's necessary to get that software working. All of that is in there, along with this neat magical word, dependencies. Right? When you download and install software, it normally depends on other libraries that it expects you to already have installed, and you may not have them installed. So it's got a dependency list in that package to help you figure out what you need. All of that stuck in one convenient file, and that's what makes a package manager so important. It used to be a nightmare to install software in Linux. It isn't anymore. Really, for the last 10 years, it's been pretty convenient. And doing it from the command line, which while that kind of sounds hard, you'll see it's actually pretty easy, too, to get that software installed and get it up and running.
Now, Don, do we have to worry about things like architectures as well? Because, well, once we get into source installing, we do have to take that into account. And that's been the history of Linux when getting software installed, correct?
Yeah, and sometimes you do have to worry about that, right? It kind of depends on the developer, right? So I mentioned that a package contains a bunch of files, right? And when you download it, that package might contain files for people with Intel CPUs, like a 32-bit, an x86 processor. Or it might contain binaries for a 64-bit CPU, like AMD 64, the Intel 64 bits. It might contain stuff for an ARM processor, right? Or it might contain all of them. They might all be rolled into one package file. It makes the package bigger, but it makes it easier on us because we don't have to worry about which one we get when we download it, right? Let me show you an example. So I'm going to use this software called Webmin. On a server, we don't normally have a GUI, right? We just have a command line and that's it. And working with the command line can be annoying sometimes. So I'm saying that here we are in the command line
in the Linux
series.
command line series.
But we can install Webmin, and it gives us a web-based user interface for being able to interact with the server and support it. It's pretty convenient, right? It's not installed by default with any Linux distro, so if I want it, I've got to install it myself. And when I go to their webpage, I'm just on webmin.com, I can see a couple of links over here, and they've got RPM, which is the Red Hat package manager. That's what I would use for Red Hat, Fedora, and CentOS, and SUSE. And then I've got the Debian package, which would be what I run for Debian, Ubuntu, and Linux Mint, and their like. There's also a tar file. That's going to just be the source files. And that's what I could use for anybody else who's not listed. I can just use that one and compile and go from there, right? But if I want Debian, this is the file that I want. Now, let me copy that link real quick, and I'm going to paste it up here. There. Whoops. I'm going to try and paste it up there. And let's take a quick look at that, right? And so if you look at the URL, here's the package name right here. It's webmin underscore 1.850 underscore all.deb. All right, so what does that name mean? Packages generally follow a standard naming convention. The first part is the name of the software. So the software is called Webmin. That's what its name is. Very exciting, right? So if you're downloading other software, it'll have a different name.
I'm on the edge of my seat, Don.
I know. And then there's an underscore, which lets you know there's a separation. And then 1.850. That's the version of the software. If you're running 1.71, then that's old. 1.85, that's new, right? So that tells me the version. And then another underscore, which tells me there's a separation. And then all, right? That all is telling you about the architecture. If it said x86 or i686 is what a lot of them are doing now, that means it's a 32-bit package. If it says x86-64, it's a 64-bit package. Or sometimes they'll say AMD 64, because technically AMD is the one who created our current 64-bit standard. You might see where it says Spark, if you're running on a Sun or Oracle Spark station, or Spark-based server. It might say PowerPC or PPC, if it's built for, well, PowerPC. It might say all like this, which means it's got more than one architecture already baked into it. Or it could be that the software doesn't care about the architecture. If the software is just a collection of web pages, it doesn't matter what processor you have. It can be any of them. It doesn't matter. There's web pages. And so it might say no arch, N-O-A-R-C-H, which means no architecture. It doesn't care what architecture. Usually when it says all, it's got more than one build inside of it. When it says no arch, it just has one build, and that one build doesn't care about the architecture, right? And then .deb, back in the olden days, the Debian packages actually ended in .pkg, but there's a ton of different software applications out there that use that PKG extension. So several years ago, they switched it to .deb. So when you see .deb, that lets you know this is a Debian package, and it's not just for Debian. We can use this for Ubuntu and for the other ones. So that's the package, and I can download that and get it installed using the built-in tools that are a part of Debian. And that's just one example, like Webmin. If you go and download other things, so for example, if I wanted to download Google Chrome, right? If I go to google.com/Chrome and I go to download Chrome, when I go to download it, it sees that I'm running Linux, but it doesn't know beyond that what I want. And so here it's giving me a choice. Do I want to download a 64-bit deb for Debian and Ubuntu, or do I want to download a 64-bit RPM for Fedora and OpenSUSE? They didn't even list Red Hat. That's odd, but anyhow. so it's giving me the choice there based on which one I want. And so when
who runs that Red Hat stuff?
I guess so. So when I go and download software, I get that choice. Sometimes you get both. Sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes you really want to download a program and they only offer it in one form or another. So for example, what is it, steampowered.com. Steam is a video game platform, and if I want to go and install Steam, it supports Linux, right? So that's nice. And when I go to install it, it didn't give me a choice for whether I wanted to do an RPM or a deb. It just did deb. And that's because they don't distribute an RPM version of this. So if I'm on a Fedora machine, I can't really install it. But if I'm on a Debian or Ubuntu, I can. There it is. It downloaded steam_latest.deb, which doesn't follow the naming convention. But anyhow, it got it. And now I can go and install it. So just be aware that you'll have that choice when you go to find software.
All right, Don. So now that we've found our installation or our software that we want to download, we hit the good old download button. Like you got your webmin going on there, and it downloads to my machine. What do I do with it after that? It just double click it?
All right, well, first off, if we're working entirely from the command line, then we don't go to a web browser and download it, right? True. We've got to be able to download it and get it right here on this machine. And I've already done that, so I've got the webmin file right there already downloaded on this machine. But let me show you how I did that. I used a utility called wget, right? Wget is a web get utility, and you can point it to URL. So you can copy a URL from a web page, right? So maybe on my desktop, I come in, I copy this link address, and then back on my remote server or wherever I'm on a command line, I can do wget and then just point to that file, and it'll reach right out and it'll download that file. So there it goes, it downloads it, and now I've got that copy right here ready to work with. So you can do this entirely from the command line and not have to have that GUI web browser to download it. But once we've got it, there it is. And well, now I've got two. But let me just get rid of that other one. There. So now I've got it, and I'm ready to actually get it installed. Okay. Now to get it installed, we can use a utility that's built into the operating system. It's called dpkg, right? Or Debian Package Manager. This is the original package utility. And I'm going to show you, this is not the one you use every day. This is the old one. But the the Debian package utility is what will let me install the software. And if you just run it, you get some basic information, or if you do --help, it'll show you all the different options it has. It's got a bunch of options, right? But normally, there's really only one option we care about. We're installing, and that's right here, -i or --install. I want to install a package. So if I want to install webmin, I can come in and just say dpkg -i, and then I can point to that file, webmin 1.850 all.deb. And when I do that, it's going to install it. Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
I need to be an administrator to install it. I'm just logged in as a regular user right now. So I'm going to change that. I'll do a sudo of dpackage so that it runs as an administrator. And now it runs, and here it goes doing the install. All right. Now the install is going to happen largely automatic, right? I'm not going to have to get involved. There it goes. It did it, installed. Oh, actually, it didn't install, did it?
Error.
I got errors. All right. This is the big limitation with dpkg. dpkg does not do dependency tracking. And I got a bunch of dependency errors right here. Dependency problems prevent configuration of webmin. And then it's telling me, oh, I need libnet-ssleay-perl. I need lib authentication, libio, apt show versions, Python. I need all this stuff, and I don't have it. Okay, so in the olden days, I would have to go to each of these websites and find each of these packages and download and install them as well. Or if I'm lucky, they might be in a repository somewhere that I can pull them all in one place. But the odds are I'd have to go to different places to find them.
My favorite is when you go to get a dependency and it requires dependencies and you got to go get those dependencies.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that, I mean, we put up with that years ago, but starting, I don't know, probably around 10 years ago, it was a long time ago, we started to get better package management, better utilities. And in the Debian world, the one that took hold was a utility called apt-get. All right? Apt-get was basically a package tracker that could not just track a package, but all of its dependencies as well. So when you went to install something, it could find the application you want, find all the other stuff that it needed, and install it for you. So you didn't have to worry about it. So while dpkg is still here, we can still use it, we don't normally because of the dependency mess. So instead, we're going to use utilities like apt-get. Okay. Now, I do want to mention something real quick before I get too far into apt-get. Apt-get is the official standard command, and it's the one most of you will use, but it's in the process of getting replaced with a newer, fancier version. So you'll likely have apt-get, but there's another utility called apt. All right? And apt by itself does basically the same thing. It's just an upgraded, fancier version. So a few years from now, all you'll have is apt, right? But right now you have apt-get and apt. Now for this show, I'm going to use, well, I'll probably go back and forth between the two, but you'll find that the command line options are the same, And so by and large, you can use them interchangeably, right? So there's not a whole lot of reason. But you'll want to start using apt, if for no other reason than the fact that it has super cow powers. So, so we certainly got that. But
Oh, they really made their argument there.
I know. So if I want to get stuff installed, though, I can do this. Before I move on to apt, though, let me just show one more thing about dpkg. I was doing dpkg-I to do the install. There's also -R to do the remove. So that's how you'd get rid of software that you were done with and you didn't need it anymore. But like I said, by and large, we're not going to be using dpkg much because of the dependency tracking. All right, so let's take a look at what this would have been like if I used apt instead, right? Let's say that I wanted to spin up a web server. So I want HTTPD installed. Well, the way apt works is, and apt-get, is they use repositories. Repositories are servers that contain tons of software. And that's one of the reasons why we can check in with that server and we can find the dependencies. It's all in one place. So I don't have to go to a vendor's website. I don't have to go to the webmin website to find webmin. It might be in a repository that I can search already. I can just go and find. I can come in and do a apt search and look for some kind of software. I'm going to look for webmin. And when I run that, it's going to look, and there it is. It found it. And it actually shows it's being installed already because when I did that dpkg install, it did install. It's just broken because all the dependencies are missing, right? And so if I did a dpkg-r webmin and, whoops, and removed it, let me just remove that. So there we go. So it's removed that package. Now when I run that apt search webmin and it goes to look, okay, now it finds it, but it's not installed. And see how it says a residual config. It sees a history of how it was there, but it's not installed. All right. We can search for just about any software. If I want to bring up a web server, I could search for HTTPD, and it's going to look in the repositories, and here it returns a number of different programs that matched what I searched for, right? And I might find the one I wanted. There was light HTTPD right there. I want Apache. I probably should have searched a little bit different. But as you poke around in here, you'll find the various things. I could also just search for Apache if that's what I want. And we can find it that way. But you can look for this software, and you can install it all right from a repository. Right? That's pretty handy if the software you want is in the repository. If it isn't, though, then you've got to do what we did a moment ago. You go to the vendor's website, you download the package that you want. So I've downloaded webmin 1.850. And then I could use apt to install it. If it's in a repository, I can just say apt install and whatever the name of the program is that I want to add, right? So if I want to add, I don't know, I was just going to try and pick something here right off the screen, but most of this is junk. You do run into that where a lot of the stuff is not what you want. I don't know, let's say that I just want the FTP client, right? So if I do a sudo apt search FTP, it'll look and find tons of FTP clients, and the one I want is just called FTP. I should have grabbed this to cut it down a little bit more, but we can come in and say
Nginx.
Yeah, we can install that one, or
probably a little less return.
Yeah, so we'll do a sudo apt install Nginx, and it'll find it. So there it is. And notice it not only found Nginx, but it says, whoops, if I can click in the right spot, these following packages will be installed. Look at all the dependencies that it found, right? libgd, libjpeg, all these other ones. Apt finds those, and apt-get finds those as well. It finds them and tells me to install it. In fact, let me cancel this. I'll say no, and let me do the same thing, and this time I'm going to say apt-get, right, instead of apt. And it goes, and it finds, and not only finds, but looks the same, right? They're trying to get apt at feature parity, and when it's there, they'll get rid of apt-get. But that hasn't happened yet. So we're really getting the same results here, and I can say yes, and that's going to install, and now I've got Nginx. And look at all the work it's having to do, all the extra software that it's having to install. That's a good bit of work.
Now, Don, with stuff that we have installed, if it's in apt, if we go to apt and you type it in and it's in the repository that's set up for it, that's great and everything works. But what if we did have to go to the vendor website? How do we track that software as updates and things like that come out? Do we have to continue to go back?
That's a challenge, right? So what happens here is if I install the local copy, right? So I've got this local copy right here. I could say sudo apt install, and I could point it right at that file. I can try, let me just /webmin. There we go. I can point it right at that file, and it's going to read it, It's going to find all the dependencies, right? So even though I downloaded the file from the vendor, it's using dependency tracking and finding it in the other repositories, and I can say yes, and it's going to install it, right? And instead of giving me a bunch of errors like before, this time it's actually going to go through and install it. It'll have the dependencies, so it'll be able to be configured, and it'll work, right? So that's great. This seems perfect. We're done. This episode's over. Right?
Well done. Thanks for joining us today.
But what happens when Webmin 1.86 comes out or Webmin 2.0 comes out, right? I installed a package right from my hard drive. There's no way for apt to know that new versions of that software have come out.
And it's not actively, like, automatically looking for updates for your software, correct?
Well, it does for the stuff that's built into the OS,
Gotcha.
right? I mean, you can manually do that. I can come in and I can say sudo apt update, right? And that tells it, I want you to go and look at all your repositories and look for new versions of software, right? And so it'll reach out there and it'll look sudo apt update or sudo apt-get update, either one. And it's going to look out, and it found for me 48 packages have updates, right? It didn't actually do the update, but it found them.
Yeah.
And then I can say sudo apt upgrade, there we go. And now it's going to reach out and it's going to upgrade those 48 packages. There it goes, nice and neat, okay? But if an update for Webmin came out, it wouldn't update it, right? It wouldn't update it because it has no idea the update exists. So what happens here is that vendors kind of have a choice. They can make a package available just like this, where you go and you download it and you get the package and that's the end of it, right? But a lot of them, if you go into their documentation and you pull up their installation instructions and things, you can find in here where, let me see if I can, whoops, let me get to the page here, where they push out installation instructions. And here it's showing basically what I did at the beginning of the show. You use wget to download it, you use dpkg to install it. They did a -- install, I did a -i, it's the same thing. But if I keep scrolling down, oh, here they warned me about the dependencies, right? So if I wanted to install those, I should have read that before the show.
It's like they knew about this beforehand.
Well, the developer should.
Yeah.
But if I keep going down right here, using the Webmin apt repository, I can add repositories, right? All the repositories are stored in this file right here, /etc/apt/sources.list. Okay, I'm going to copy that and go back into my terminal. And oh, my terminal is finishing a install. Let's see. Oh, grub is updating. So let me just, I'll accept defaults on that. So back in my terminal, if I edit that file, I'll see all the places that it's looking when it does an update. So I'm just going to do a sudo vi, and I'll edit /etc/apt/sources.list. And this file is used by both apt and apt-get. And so I can pull that up, and here's a list. And some of these will be enabled, some of these will be disabled, right? So as I look, there might be some sources that I'm not actually using. But the majority of these are enabled. See down here at the bottom, there's two. This archive is disabled, right? So there's a couple that are disabled. They'll have hash signs or pound symbols, number signs, whatever, at the beginning of the line that disables them. All these other ones are turned on, though. And I can add third-party repositories into this stuff. All I need to do is come down to the bottom of the line, and if the vendor has released a repository, I can take this line right here that they're posting for me, and I can copy that, and I can paste it right into the file. And now, whenever we check for updates, it'll look there also, and it will find those updates. Now, little problem with this. We can trust all of these repositories. They come from the original operating system vendor. So in this case, Canonical, they make Ubuntu. I'm on an Ubuntu server, and so they make it. Webmin, can I trust them? Well, maybe their repository gets compromised, and they're starting to push out versions of the software that have malware attached to it, right? We need a way to verify that. And so most vendors that have a repository like this will also have security keys that you can use to verify the authenticity of the software. You always want to look for that. And so here they're giving me the instructions on how I could do that, right? And their instructions are a little bit weird. So we're going to just grab this line so that I can come in here and download that key. Whoops, they already put the wget in for me. So I'm going to download that key, and then you need to be a root user to add keys. So that's what this next line is. I'll sudo it. They don't sudo it in their example, but you need to. And I'll do apt-key add, and I'm going to add the key for that developer. And now whenever I download software from that developer, I can use that key to verify whether it's been tampered with and make sure it's safe. But now whenever I do a sudo apt update, it's not just looking at Canonical's repositories anymore or the Debian repositories. Now it's also looking at the webmin repositories and making sure that I've got the latest version. So right there I can see that it's hitting like line 6, 7, and 8 were all webmin repositories, right? Line 5 there was an ignore, so apparently there's one that's disabled. But the other 3 it checked, and now when an update for webmin comes out, I'll be able to get it, and it's just part of my routine update process. I don't have to do anything special to update webmin. It's just there, and it's done.
Now, Don, one of our chat room members there is asking Stanley, he's piping in yet again, well, great stuff, as always. Do we want to go with these suggested packages that they give to you?
Sometimes. You know, it depends. When you install software, a lot of times there'll be suggested packages that come along with it that you may not need. Now, on a workstation, I'll usually install them just so it doesn't annoy me, right? But on a server, we're usually trying to maintain the minimal footprint possible. And so when you get a suggested package, sometimes that's not necessarily what you want. For example, let's say that I'm on a server, and let's see if this one will do it. I don't know if it will or not. This is actually an Ubuntu server that's hosted in Amazon Web Services, and so they have a special deployment of Ubuntu. It's a little bit different, so I'm not sure if it'll do it. But sometimes you'll see where you run a command, and it can't find the command, and it says, oh, you know, if you want it, here's a quick way you can install it and have it. I could do a sudo apt install MC, right? And Midnight Commander's not installed. Here's how I can install it real quick. Now, that's kind of a suggestion. Or when you install another software, it might have all the packages it needs and then have additional ones that it suggests. In those scenarios, if you choose to install them, it doesn't necessarily hurt you or hurt the application, but it increases your security footprint. If I'm trying to maintain a secure server and I see that Midnight Commander is not installed, that's not a message to me saying I need to install Midnight Commander. It's a message to me saying, oh, I just need to find a different way to do this. I wanted to copy some files, so I'll use CP because I know that's built in.
Yeah.
I don't need Midnight Commander for that. I run into that with editors a lot, where you run Nano and, well, it's installed, but it's not installed. I'm like, all right, well, fine, I'll use Vi or Vim or whatever, right? You try not to install things or install extra things. And what you'll find is that when you're installing software, like with apt-get, if I do a man for apt-get, it's got a ton of options, and you can tell it not to pull dependencies. You can tell it not to pull suggested packages. You can really configure it and get advanced with it. Usually, you know, you just want to install the minimum amount to get things working on a server. On a workstation, you can go a little bit further. Right? And you know, it's also worth mentioning, I'm doing apt-get here, right? Yeah. Or apt. There are other utilities out there that may be available. For example, aptitude. Let me see if I've got it here. Nope. But I can install it
with apt-get.
Yeah, let me install it because I just kind of want to show it to you. I don't use aptitude myself, but I know that it is available, and some people like it.
I do. I've used it, and it's pretty convenient, especially for like searching through things and looking for stuff. I like it.
Yeah, you know, when you're working with the command line, you've got to remember the commands. But there's sometimes, I'm going to call them pseudo GUI utilities or whatever.
As in PSE?
Yeah, you know, they're not really a graphical user interface, but it's kind of close. Aptitude is like that. If I pull up aptitude, here we go, we get kind of a navigable menu, and I can come in and say, you know, let me look at my installed packages, or let me look at not installed packages, virtual packages. I'll go into not installed, right? And then it gives me categories. I want to find... HTTP, right? I want web servers, right? And the number of packages gets smaller and smaller. There were like 50,000 packages a second ago. There's only 44 in the web server category. And I can go in there, and there's only 5 in the main fully supported category. Meanwhile, there's 39 in universe, which is everything. I'm going to go in main, and now I can find, oh, here's Apache if I want to install that, and that's it. Oh, you know, I figured light HTTPD would be in there, but no. So I can find that, though, and if I want to install Apache, here it is. I can choose that package, and we can go in and choose to install it. You'll see right now it's not installed, but I can install it if I want. It's showing me the dependencies, the information about the package. I can read about it, and then I can choose to install it or update it or whatever if that's what I want. Up at the top, it's giving me the menu kind of commands, right? I can push G to preview, download, install, or remove packages. So if I hit G, oh, I haven't tagged this one yet, so I would need to tag it. You got to do a Control T, and then you come in, and it's got this whole kind of menu system that you can use to be able to work with that. So I'm a little awkward in this one because I don't use it much. Play Minesweeper?
Darn right. Don is playing Minesweeper.
On my first pick, I lost. I had no idea it was in here. So
that's great.
But hey, this is a great example of increasing your security footprint.
That's right.
I wanted to install an easy package manager on a server, and I got Minesweeper, and that's not something we want. So that's why we have to be careful about what we install on a server. But otherwise, I guess now the real question is, how do I get out of this thing? Q enough, and you'll get out. Right. There we go. Aptitude is one example. If you've got a GUI, there's the whole software store that you use on there that's designed to be simple, but designed for workstations, not for servers. So don't feel like you've only got one choice. The graphical one is actually called Synaptic. Is the GUI-based one. Aptitude is command line. There's deselect is another one that's command line. I know some people like it. I just stick with what's built in because minimal footprint. That's what I normally think, right? So apt-get or just apt by itself. Those are available. And there's also another utility called apt-cache, which is a kind of handy one. With apt-get, you could search for packages. With the newer app, you're supposed to search with apt-cache because you cache this list of packages and you can search locally, so it's faster and more robust. So there's new tools like that are coming out all the time. But as far as getting software installed, that's really all there is to it. If it's already in a repo, then you're just doing apt install and the name of the software. If it's not in the repo, you can download the package and install it individually. Or if that developer has a repo, hopefully they do, you can add it to the list, and now anytime you do updates, that'll update as well. Installing from a repository is always the best if you have the choice.
Excellent stuff, Don, because when it comes to software, installation has been one of the more difficult things for the new Linux user. So being able to easily download, install software onto their system is really going to help a lot of people that are new to the Linux game, and I think you did a great job of showing us how we can actually do that without making it so convoluted that it makes you maybe just run for the nearest Windows system. So anything else you'd like to add to this show before we close her down?
That's really about it. There are a few other package managers that are always on the horizon. I encourage you not to jump to the latest shiny package manager that comes along because a lot of them do have dependency tracking issues. They get better and more robust over time. If your package manager makes a mistake, it can break software and it can be very difficult to fix it. So I encourage you to stick with the tried and true ones. Like all the ones I mentioned on the show today, those are all very stable, mature ones that are available and welcome to be used. But if you hear about some new shiny one on the internet, and you're like, oh, maybe I'll try that one instead. Just be really careful. Don't do that on production systems. Packages aren't something you want to mess up.
All right. Well, there you go, everyone. Now you know how to run out and install software on your Debian-based systems. If you're running a boot or anything like that, Linux Mint, you can, with confidence, get some software installed. That Minesweeper is calling your name. I know that for a fact. Don, thanks for joining us today, and we do thank our audience for watching. But it looks like it's that time again for us to call it a day. Signing off for IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Don Pizzette.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.